Welcome to my next Lost Season 2 episode review video. Before I get into that, though, pretty important, if you're not caught up to the point where I am in rewatching or watching Lost, or you're just not entirely sure, then you definitely need to take the initiative and pay attention to the episode's title, which of course I'll mention, as well as put in the description. If that happens to be the case, you found that you're not caught up, it would be my recommendation that you don't watch this video any further to avoid any potential spoilers. And I want to be honest with everybody, I've already seen Lost 3 times. It's not a first time watch for me, and I'm a big fan of the show. Going into these episode review videos, Lost was my 5th favorite show of all time. I wonder where that will rank after I rewatch the show. The only reason why it's 5th is because I don't watch Lost enough. Only 3 times, and the show's been over with since 2010. I would have thought I'd rewatch it 8 times by now. Like Dexter and Breaking Bad, I watch like every year or so. Anyway, love Lost. Really like the show, but I'm not the only one that's rewatching Lost. Well, actually, I'm not the only one watching Lost. The legendary Crazy Coffee Man, who you see in my comment section in Dexter, Breaking Bad, and Lucifer content, is actually watching Lost for the first time. So, join us on the journey, and let's discuss this awesome and amazing show, and let's keep it spoiler-free. Obviously, Crazy Coffee Man is watching it for the first time, so don't talk about anything past the episode review that you're watching. But with all that said, this will be Lost Season 2, Episode 2. The title of this episode is called Adrift, and this will be my review, reaction, recap after just finishing watching the episode. So, we have Sawyer emerging from the water after the attack on their raft. He manages to grab some wreckage and gets to Michael, but Michael has stopped breathing after screaming for Walt as he's kind of drowning. At the hatch, Locke shouts down the shaft for Kate, who has vanished. Tying himself a line of rope, Locke heads down after her. Sawyer begins to perform CPR and manages to revive Michael, but is forced to restrain him to stop him struggling for Walt. So the screaming of Walt was really annoying. Like, Walt! Walt! Where's my son? You'll hear a lot of that from Michael. Then we have a Michael flashback where he visits his lawyer about fighting for custody of Walt. The lawyer says giving up Walt for adoption so Brian Porter could become his legal father would mean Michael would have no rights at all. Michael wants to fight all the way, but the lawyer tells him that the proceedings will cost a lot of money, asking if he's sure. Michael is adamant, however, that he is going to get his son back. And then back to the present time on the island, Michael refuses to give up, shouting, even though the fishing boat that the kidnappers used is long gone, Walt! Locke reaches the bottom of the shaft and wanders around to discover that he is in fact some kind of concrete bunker. He removes his shoes and tiptoes further inside. He finds a kitchen and discovers Kate dazed on the floor. And then a man suddenly appears behind him, that's Desmond, holding a gun, and asks Locke, "Are you him?" Back to the raft stuff, Sawyer screams for Jen, and Michael asks Sawyer if he feels guilty for making them fire the flare. The two argue, and Michael orders him to get off his raft, but not before they hear noises and are attacked. Sawyer's bleeding shoulder has attracted a shark. A shark? Sawyer decides to try and swim for another piece of raft wreckage after his argument, managing to hold on to a small piece. As Michael looks on, Sawyer tells him he was trying to save Walt when he was shot, contrary to what Michael may think about saving himself. And then we go back to the the Michael flashback. A hearing takes place between Michael and Susan Lloyd, accompanied by their lawyer. Susan's lawyer began to nitpick as Michael's history as a father is not the good. It's also mentioned that Susan paid for all of Michael's medical bills. All this culminating in the conclusion for someone who wants to retain his parental right. You don't know very much about your son. Michael, however, stands firm that he is Walt's father. Back on the island, Sawyer decides to pull out the bullet in his shoulder with his bare hand, as Michael insists he will not be able to do it. Sawyer screams in pain. Nevertheless, Sawyer is coldly asking Michael, or he's successful, and then he asks Michael for a Band-Aid afterward. Yeah, I just got a Band-Aid laying around on this really tiny piece of a raft that I'm floating around on. Locke pretends that he is indeed him. However, when the man asks, what did the one snowman say to the other snowman, and Locke can't answer, he realizes Locke is lying. The man orders Kate to tie Locke up, but Locke says Kate should be tied up because she is a fugitive and is more dangerous one. The man, and because he's like, well, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I just work in a box company. So the man, Desmond, allows it. Locke ties Kate's hands, but also hides a pocket knife in her trousers. Kate is then locked inside a darkened room by the man. Jack, waiting at the caves, decides to follow Locke and Kate to the hatch. Hurley, of course, doesn't want this to happen. Claire and Charlie watch from afar, but Claire suddenly notices a Virgin Mary statue in his bag, and Charlie brushes it off, saying nothing important, says it might be a nice thing to have around. It's got the heroin in it, remember. Still struggling at sea, Sawyer submerges that the kidnapper's boat was too small to travel far, so it must have come from the island, and Sawyer reminds him that Russo said that the others were coming for the child, and that at the time they believed this meant Aaron. Sawyer believes that they were after Walt all along. Michael splashes water at Sawyer for saying his son's name, causing Sawyer's piece of wreckage to break apart, and then he returns to share Michael's section, and the two grudgingly sit together. Michael tells Sawyer, you have no idea what it's like to care for someone else. Then back to the Michael flashback. At another conference room, Susan speaks to Michael alone. She says she thinks Michael will win in court, but cannot understand why he is doing this when he is not involved in Walt's life and could never provide what she could provide. She pleads for Michael to let Walt go and hands him the adoption papers. And then back on the island, gagged with her hands tied behind her back, Kate attempts to free herself, but the bindings on her hands are tight. Kate maneuvers her arms in front and uses the pocket knife to free herself. Then she finds a light switch, discovering that she is actually in a pantry of food, a pantry full of food with Dharma labels. You'll find more about the Dharma Initiative. Anyway, she notices a ventilation shaft, but before she climbs up, she spots some Apollo candy bars. Apollo bar time on a shelf, and cannot help eating one. Moving up inside the vent, she begins to crawl through. Nearby, Locke is explaining to the man, Desmond, about the plane crash. He says his name is Desmond and asks how many of the survivors are sick, and a buzzer begins to sound. Desmond orders Locke up, takes him to a computer, and tells him to enter the numbers 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, and 42, and then press execute. Locke hesitates but does as Desmond tells him, and the buzzing stops, and a timer on the wall resets to 108. Jack enters the hatch. Locke tells Desmond that he's a doctor. Jack shouts for Kate and Locke. Desmond observes him through a mirror scope that he has set up. Kate sees Jack through an air vent, but Desmond plays loud music, and Jack can't hear Kate call out for him. Desmond confronts Jack, ordering him to drop his weapon before Jack realizes that he knows the man from the last episode. We have already seen that. Michael and Sawyer discover one of the pontoons from the raft, which is much sturdier than their current piece of wreckage. Handing Michael the gun, Sawyer heads after it. The shark emerges from the ocean, and Michael violently fires 4 rounds, venting his rage. Both manage to get to the pontoon, and they lie down exhausted. Back to a flashback for Michael. At a park, Susan and the toddler Walt arrive to meet Michael. Michael finds it hard to call himself Walt's father, but hesitantly tells Walt that he will have a great life with his mother and Brian Porter. He also promises that your daddy loves him very much and will always will. Before leaving, he gives Walt a toy polar bear, asking Susan one day at least to tell him who it was from, and then Susan says goodbye. And then back to the island. As the sun rises, Michael promises to get back his son. As the two realize that the current has brought them back to the island, "We're home," adds Sawyer. The two wash up on the shore and immediately hear Jin. He runs out to them shouting, they finally realize that he is saying, others, 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 as a group of strangers carrying weapons ominously appear, advancing on the three, and that's what ends this episode of Lost. So pretty good stuff here. Really liking rewatching this show. I'm going to score this episode an 8.3 out of 10. And my characters of the episode, I'm going to obviously pick Michael and Sawyer. Locke and Kate, I think were a good... Any one of those four were standout characters in my opinion. Now we have a food pantry with Apollo bars with the Dharma logo on them. The Dharma Initiative. Yeah, I liked it a lot. So you've heard everything that I had to say. Now it's your turn. If you're a fan of Lost and you want to help me out with the YouTube algorithm, please consider Hulk smashing the like button. Share the video with a friend that likes the show Lost. Put this video on any one of your social media platforms. Don't forget to sound off in the comment section about what your thoughts are on this episode of Lost. What would you rate it, and whom, if you had to choose, would be your characters of the episode? And if you like Lost and have already seen Lost, a couple of shows that kind of remind me of Lost are the show From and the show La Brea. Both pretty good shows. La Brea is a little bit less edgy in my opinion, but still, I'm watching it right now as a matter of fact. From is really good, and they're about to have a third season of that coming out, I believe in October-ish, fall-ish, so just keep those in mind. And then last but certainly not least, don't forget to hit that sub button. You're watching this video anyway. Subscribe to the channel, join the team, show your damn support, and be a part of something special, and you never know what you're going to see on JDevTV.